Home isn't just a place, it's a feeling. Whether you're at home, your business, or online, ADT helps keep you safe. With security systems, home automation, alarms, and surveillance, so you can feel at home, wherever you are. Go to ADT.com to get that feeling. ADT, home, safe home.
Here we are on a really busy day. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests appear on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. And I'm sure at some point yesterday you saw reports of the story of the federal government going after college basketball in a big way, in a way that could have significant reverberations around the sport. 4 college basketball assistant coaches facing federal corruption charges, and a Hall of Famer staring quite possibly at his professional mortality. Mm-hmm. That seems to be what we have going here right now.
Yeah, a couple of different things there, from, the assistant coaches, money going to them to trying to steer players to certain areas, and we have the players getting some money to go to certain schools. I mean, there's a couple of different things going on here. You can decide for yourself what's more egregious in going on. I would imagine it would be the assistant coaches lining their own pockets and guiding players to where they want them to go, whether it's a financial system, an agent, tailors. That's amazing to tailors, to certain tailors.
Yeah, guys to make their suits.
These guys are getting money to do it, and this has been going on. Listen, it's been going on. It's been happening. And you can see, if you want to go down that road, you can see how you can make it happen. And they've gotten busted. So I guess you wonder, how deep is it going to go? Guys are, when you get threatened with prison, all of a sudden you start talking a little more about, giving up some more names about what's going on. Does that make your sentence a little lighter if you're truly going to go to jail? How many more people are going to be, involved in this at the end of the day?
What will the impact be on the sport as we know it? Those are just a few of the questions. Jay Bilas will join us live in a second. Seth Greenberg is here on our set right now. And so let's start with this, Seth. Yesterday, all over Twitter, all I kept seeing from people was every college basketball coach in America right now is sweating, is panicking, is nervous. What are they nervous about?
I don't think every college coach in America is nervous, but I'm sure there are college coaches nervous because, look, what are the chances that they could have someone in their organization that's doing something they don't know? Now, look, some head coaches know everything that's going on. Let's not fool ourselves. But the job of an assistant coach is to recruit and get players. The job of assistant coach is to keep things off the head coach's table. Mm-hmm. So, could there be things happening that they don't know about? There could be, not in every instance, but every head coach in America is having this meeting yesterday. There's no doubt in my mind. You've got your staff, you've got your compliance director, and you've got your athletic administrator sitting in a room. And that head coach is turning to his staff and saying, there's anything I need to know. All right, let me know right now. He's trying to get out ahead of it. Do we have an issue here? Have we done anything that we shouldn't have done? And look, in a lot of ways, he's trying to cover his own rear end. All right, because, with head coach accountability and clearing himself from the issue. But look, some head coaches will know what has transpired. Some head coaches won't, because some assistant coaches think it's their job. There's so much pressure on these coaches to get players. And in their minds, they feel like maybe they're not doing something. Look, it's been going on forever. That's just the way it is. The egregious issue is the assistant coaches that have taken money to deliver players to money managers and agents. To me, that breaks every single rule that I've ever grown up with as a coach. Because as a coach, there's a special bond you have with your players. As a coach, your job is to help that player get somewhere they can't get themselves. As a coach, you're trying to mentor them. You're not supposed to be pimping them. And to me, that is egregious. In terms of paying players, that's been going on forever. It used to be boosters and alumni and coaches.
Bag of money.
Now, because of the business of college basketball, all right, it's become a corporate issue with money managers, agents, and obviously in some instances, shoe companies.
Before we bring Jay in from a legal side of this, we can talk about the rogue assistant that feels he needs to do this to look good or to keep his, or whatever it is, and to where they keep it off the head coach's plate. But where is it? Go back to your head coaching days. Did you have the meetings with the assistants and say, everything is above board? Did you actually, and do coaches actually have that conversation
Surely
all the time that says, so if it's because it's my head gang that's going to roll for this thing. So we need nothing below the table going on.
Every head coach has to make a decision how you're going to conduct your business. And, like some coaches say, we're going right to the gray area, but we're not crossing the gray area. Because everyone goes to the gray area. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, there's a gray area, and people are going to go to the gray area, but we're not crossing this line. We're not going to impact our credibility and who we are and what we stand for. So, yeah, it's a really, really difficult situation that we're in athletics. And let's also, the one thing I disagreed with as the charges were being presented, they're making the athletes sound like they're victims. Now, look, the victims are the guys that were sold to agents, sold to the money managers. But the victims aren't the people that are asking for extra benefits. Because, look, when you're talking about $100,000, that's not just some fictitious numbers where some guy wakes up and say, hey, by the way, Mike, I'm going to give you $100,000 if you come to our place. That's most times that prospect saying, you know what, I really like you guys, but, it's going to cost $100,000.
Kind of negotiated a little bit.
It is initiated. The extra benefit is being initiated most times by the prospect.
All right, and so it's that $100,000 that will, I'm going to use the word likely, certainly possibly cost a Hall of Famer his job. And that was what made me call Jay Bilas yesterday, because as this stuff was coming out, I was having trouble understanding that piece of it and why the federal government would be involved in that. And so Bilas, who is not only a magnificent college basketball analyst, but of course also a lawyer, was able to explain this. So Jay, good morning. We got Mike and Seth Greenberg here. Let's go to that piece of this. So if indeed it is true that a Louisville assistant coach is giving a $100,000, is arranging for Adidas to give $100,000 to a potential recruit for that player to come play at Louisville. I called you and I said, I understand that's against NCAA rules, but why is that a crime? Why is that something that the federal government is getting involved in? And you explained it extraordinarily well.
Well, it's a scheme to defraud, and it's a scheme to defraud a federally funded institution. So essentially, any institution that's getting more than $10,000 in federal funds, the federal authorities can govern this type of issue. And so the theory is, because the NCAA rules were broken, it put the institution in danger of economic harm. They're giving out scholarships on false pretenses. They have the chance to disgorge funds that monies that they would earn from winning in tournaments. They could be hit with fines. Players could be ineligible, and therefore they'd have to vacate victories and give money back, things like that. And then the government is also alleging that it interfered with the school's ability to control its assets, and the assets meaning the players and their scholarships. So essentially the government's referring to the players as assets of the university, which clearly they are. So it's that sort of theory that you are putting the institution at economic risk for economic harm. And each one of these players and each one of these coaches has to sign a declaration annually that says that the players are eligible, that they don't know of any NCAA violations and the like. So they're signing false declarations and defrauding the institution. So most of the things that we're dealing with here in the normal course, that really aren't any big deal. I mean, there's nothing wrong with shoe companies entering into agreements with schools and coaches and the like. And there's nothing wrong with giving advice to someone on, hey, this is a good money or this is a good place to go to school or things like that. It's the exchange of money here that's the big deal, and the fact that you could have economic harm. It's kind of like there's nothing wrong with the mortgage industry, but if you're a mortgage broker and you're taking bribes in mortgage loans, that's bank fraud, and there's economic harm that goes along with that. But one last thing. I mean, listen, there's a lot to unpack here, but there people have been throwing around, and myself included, like for these violations and these federal laws, it carries up to 20 years in prison. And I heard some people saying maybe as much as 80 years. That would be if these things were served consecutively. It's such a small matter relative to what the U.S. attorney usually deals with. So we're not going to be seeing people sentenced to 20 years in prison. This could be, periods of months, if anything, down the line. This is an important matter, obviously, for college sports. but it is not the most important matter that the federal courts are dealing with. So we're not going to be seeing anyone sentenced to those kind of numbers in this.
Completely agree. Unless you're one of those guys that hears that number, then maybe you shake a little bit. But I agree with you. They're not going to serve that. The question is, Jay, how many more names will come out? Will these guys talk? How much more information? Do you see this as the start or the opening of something that's going to involve many more assistant coaches?
Yeah, it's the start because, and I agree with you, Mike. Like if somebody dangled, said, hey, you're going to go to jail for 6 months, I'd be shaking.
Yeah.
That sounds like a long time. But relative to 20 years, I'm just relative to what, these courts, corruption and cartels and all that. They're not trying to blow the lid. Like I think you had mentioned, people have been steered to get suits made. That wasn't happening here, and the feds wouldn't get involved in that. They're not trying to blow the lid off the suit making industry. That's not an issue here. This goes beyond that. But is this going to get bigger? Yes, it is. I think you could see like some of the runners and the financial services guys could lead to some agents. And you wind up, going into agents' offices and seizing all their records, finding out some things. That's ultimately where this will lead. You're going to see people lose their jobs over this, and you're going to have a lot of people. The technical reach further than this. I don't know whether it reaches into football. Ultimately, if you wind up having to present a lot of different people, but the idea that this stops only at basketball would be kind of naive.
All right, Mike and Mike, Jay Bilas is with us. Let's put him on hold a second and try and see if we can get a little bit better phone line, because what he's saying is really important, and it's important that we hear it. Seth Greenberg, meanwhile, continues with us in our studio.
I just want to say really quick, I'm just reading the report, about the tailors. He said the bribes include choices of schools, shoe sponsors, agents, even tailors.
Yeah.
I mean, I just read that because it sounds ridiculous.
Yeah.
You got to wear a good suit when you walk across the stage and shake the commissioner's hand.
I think the point that he's making is if it was that
alone,
the feds wouldn't be involved in this.
Right.
Let me ask Seth, because there's a couple of things in the interest of time I want to make sure we get to here. The name Pitino comes up a lot over and over again in this. We'll get to him in a second. We also have some pretty high-profile programs whose assistant coaches have been named directly, namely Arizona, hugely high-profile coach in Sean Miller, USC, Oklahoma State, big-time programs. So if the assistants are involved in this sort of thing, if the Chuck Persons of the world are involved in this sort of thing, does that then hit the head coach? Does Bruce Pearl wind up in trouble because of that? Does Sean Miller wind up in trouble because of that?
It all depends on the situation. If it's paying a player, yes. If it's a player, an assistant coach getting paid to deliver a player, obviously that's not benefiting the institution, nor is he working on behalf of the head coach. He's working on behalf of himself. I don't think a head coach should be responsible or accountable for that. Now, there will be violations if there are players in their program, and there's a little bit of head coach responsibility there. I'm not sure if an assistant coach is getting paid to deliver a player, that would cause a coach to get fired. I think what causes a head coach to get fired is when players are being paid directly, because those assistant coaches are working for themselves, not for the institution, not for the head coach. They're working for their own benefit. Jay made an interesting point, though, because we're talking about basketball. In your sport, like in basketball, you can identify the best of the best. You've been through a lot of AAU stuff when they're 15, 16, 17 years old. The whole one and done or two and done mentality is these money managers, these agents can say, you know what, I'm going to invest in Mike Golick, and I'm going to get a return on my investment in 7 months, 14 months. In football, the same thing I think is happening, but in football it's happening maybe at the end of a kid's sophomore year.
Of college.
Of college. They've identified, this guy's going to be special. And then that's when that process begins in the
there's no
football.
doubt. I mean,
it's not just a basketball issue.
No.
This is a college athletics issue. This is a business issue. This is, if I'm a money manager, if I'm an agent, it's a very small investment in relation to the potential return on investment in a short period of time.
Seth, what happens to Rick Pitino?
If these allegations are verified, there's no way he can survive this. And it's as simple as this. They have a major investigation that they are appealing right now, where he's got 5 games that he's being suspended, potentially taking down a banner that's hanging in the Yum Center. While that investigation is going on, another assistant coach under his supervision is committing a major NCAA violation. The last time that happened, a major violation while you're being investigated, I think probably was SMU. They got shut down.
Yeah.
So, look, Rick Pitino's a guy I looked up to when I was a young coach. 5-star basketball camp. He was the guy that started it all for all of us, whether it's John Calipari, myself. I mean, there's hundreds of coaches that started in that camp that are coaching in college. But there's no way, my gut feeling, that he can survive. There's no way he can survive this scandal a second time.
We want to ask Jay this, so just let me give everybody quickly a timeline of what Seth was talking about. June 11th, the sanctions came down on Louisville. During the summer, Louisville re-upped with Adidas for a new 10-year, $160 million extension. July 27th, so 6 weeks after that June 11th date, the FBI recorded a July meeting in which an assistant coach at Louisville was briefed on a plan by Adidas to funnel thousands of dollars to a potential high school recruit. And the assistant coach is caught on tape saying, we got to be very low-key about this. So, I mean, I don't think there's any way that Pitino can. And Pitino, again, is saying, I knew nothing.
Right.
As the other case, I knew nothing, but you can't live on that.
And that brings us back to Jay Bilas again, because, Jay, you and I talked about this yesterday. The idea of I didn't know this was going on doesn't work anymore because of a rule change, right, Jay? Explain that for our audience.
There are relatively new coach accountability rules where a head coach can no longer say, well, I didn't know. Whether it's reasonable or not for him or her to say that, they are imputed to know everything that's going on within their program with regard to the normal course of business. And, you know, based on your last question with regard to the last scandal at Louisville, you know, I looked at that as something that was so off the grid and so unimaginable that I believed that Rick Pitino didn't know anything about that. I don't think you can make the same claim with regard to recruiting. That is imaginable, and it does happen. And I think what we're looking at here is a complete cleaning of house of the Louisville athletic department. I think the athletic director loses his job. I think because it's really easy to find out exactly who that assistant coach was based upon their travel records. So Louisville knows exactly who that is. So I can't imagine that person is going to be employed beyond today. And now what they do with Rick Pitino, I do not know. But I agree with Seth that given the way college athletics works, I can't imagine him keeping his job after this. And especially after the last, when you've got two things back to back. That's just not the way college sports has tended to work. It would be an extraordinary happening if you saw Rick Pitino sort of remain in place given this. It's an extraordinarily difficult position for Louisville to be in right now because they've got a season starting. But I can't imagine him surviving this.
All right, it's Jay Bilas with terrific insight into all this. Jay, thanks a million. Thank you for yesterday. Again, as soon as all this was going on, I saw a bunch of stuff that didn't make sense to me. And so I called Jay, and he gave me a lot of this explanation.
The thing that amazes me about Jay is all this was about money and everything yesterday is Jay charged us to have him on this morning. I didn't understand that.
Billable hours.
Shocking.
Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance, creators of the Name Your Price tool. Choose from a range of coverage options and pick the price that works for you. This coaching accountability thing, Seth, I'm sorry, Mike, but that is fascinating to me because that is something we talk about all the time. And I wouldn't know. I not only didn't ever coach major college sports, I didn't play major college sports. Mike, you've been much closer to it than I have. But Seth, you've been there. You coached it. You know all these guys, and you know them all the way back. When a coach says, I didn't know about stuff, how much should we believe?
I think look, you think about, do you know everything your kids have done when they were growing up? They lived in your house.
No. Yeah.
All right? Do you
Not
know
100%.
everything your spouse does? No, you can't know everything. So is there a portion where the head coach doesn't know? Yeah, I'm sure there is. But there's also a portion where one head coach is responsible to know, and also that there are probably portions that the head coach does know, but he can use that. But I do think, and do I say it's right? No, it's not right. But I do think that an assistant coach at times really, I was an assistant coach longer than I was a head coach, really believes his job is to keep things off the head coach's desk, not put things on the head coach's desk. So, most assistant coaches feel like my job is to develop relationships, earn trust, recruit players. And the one thing I want to make really clear is that not every relationship an assistant coach has with a money manager, with an agent, or with a grassroots basketball coach is illicit. Because there are a lot of those relationships that are real because, every prospect has a circle of influence. And your job as a coach, a head coach or an assistant coach, whomever you are, is to touch everyone in that circle of influence. At worst, get them neutral. Hopefully get them working for you when you're not there. Because in the end, when a kid makes a decision, who's working for you when you're not there? Now, maybe in your situation, your family made those decisions with your children. But you know what? A lot of people, very successful people, have other people help their children make these decisions. So as an assistant coach or a head coach, you want to touch the people in the circle of influence. So they're working for you, or at least not working against you. So every money manager, every agent that is advising a prospect, every shoe company representative, every grassroots, look, there are some great grassroots programs that are doing unbelievably good things. So every one of those guys, let's not say every one of those guys is a bad guy. There are some people during the course of time that have, way back in the day when high school coaches were selling players to schools, way back in the day when high school coaches were asking for money if you wanted to come in and speak to their prospects. It's become bigger business. It's not mom and pop, it's corporate and money managers. There are a rogue of every walk in life. And there'll be rogue money managers, there'll be rogue agents, there'll be rogue coaches. That's just the way it is. So let's not paint everyone a villain, whether it's the players or these other entities.
Mike, a final thought.
Well, I mean, listen, I think you choose your path. These coaches chose new. Listen, everybody went in with his eyes wide open. There should be nobody that got indicted or whatever was charged yesterday that go, how did this happen? I didn't do anything wrong. They all knew. All the way down to a player that's, and I agree with you, a number's not coming out of thin air. Players know that they can get money in some places, so they're going to ask for money in some places. And these assistant coaches knew exactly what they were doing, and they got nailed. My thought process is going to be, where does it go? Does it bleed over into football? Because you're right. There's no way it's just basketball. But I also agree with you. I think the majority of people are on the up and up. Okay, I do. But you find this out. Where does it go? What more names become involved? And the biggest name in this is Rick Pitino. You just wonder, does he get fired, or does he just say, you know what? I didn't know anything, but it's under my watch, so I'm going to resign. Is he going to do something like that? But I think his tenure's done. Other head coaches are going to be fired, and how many more names will we see?
Super quick, Seth, go.
I just think that this season, we're going to have a cloud over our season this year because you're talking about the biggest programs, the best programs, the biggest names in our industry are being impacted. 3 of the top 7 teams in the country preseason are being impacted. Who else is going to be impacted? What players are going to be eligible? What coaches are going to be coaching those teams when the season begins? All those things are going to impact this season and the landscape of college basketball throughout the season.
Thanks a million. Seth Greenberg, terrific insight. Thank you. Thanks to Jay Bilas and a whole lot more. We'll continue our coverage of this. Back to the NFL with Damian Woody in our studio next.
Home isn't just a place. It's a feeling that you're safe to enjoy the things that matter most. ADT lets you take that feeling with you. Whether you're at home, your business, or online, we help keep you safe. With security systems, home automation, alarms, and surveillance, so you can feel at home wherever you are. Go to ADT.com to get that feeling for less than $1 a day. ADT. Home. Safe home.
You're listening to Love Advice with Leanne. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, Leanne. Longtime listener, first-time caller. Why, in your professional opinion, do you never take my calls off the air?
Is this Carl?
Yep, it's Carl. I mean, we had a few dates. Everything was great. I thought,
Well, when you switch to Geico, you could save a lot of money on car insurance.
Okay, awesome.
You should call them.
I will.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
Let's bring Damian Woody into the conversation here. And, of course, there's been so much talk about this around the NFL. D. Wood, let me start. What I want to ask you about this, and we're going to go on the field for sure here, is you've got some places, particularly in Carolina, where it feels like the players who may want to have the opportunity to express themselves in certain ways are not being given the ability to do so. Now, we know some players went to Jerry Richardson's house yesterday, who was the only NFL owner who was once a player himself. And they had a conversation, and the team said that conversation will remain private. But what would you imagine is going on in that locker room? We saw opportunities for players across the NFL this weekend in different ways to express their emotions based upon what has happened over the course of the last week and well beyond that. But in a place like Carolina, if the players truly aren't being given that opportunity, if they strongly want to, what would you imagine is going on in that locker room?
Well, I can imagine some guys are thinking to themselves, what is my worth here? You know, or do you look at me as a guy that's I'm just here for your entertainment? Or do you look at me as a guy who's not only a football player, but an active participant in the community, a person who wants to, as a society, trying to bring people together? Because for me, and again, different people have different viewpoints on this whole thing. But for me, I look at this whole thing as, how do we try to bring people together to create a more perfect union? You know, because this whole weekend I've been listening to all the discussions and everything, and the one word that really came back to me was patriotism. And there's many forms of patriotism to me, whether it's, you stand up and you're saluting the flag, or guys who are kneeling because they love the country so much that they want to, again, like I just said, create a more perfect union. So to hear the stories out of Carolina and seeing that their opportunity might be suppressed because of, the powers that be don't want that to affect maybe the bottom line business, I think it's unfortunate, because the issues that we're talking about, I think, supersede the game of football.
Do you think what the Cowboys did will, A, appease players who kneel during the anthem, and on the other side of it, appease those who want to boycott the NFL because players are kneeling during the anthem? For those who may not know, the Cowboys all kneeled together before the national anthem. The flag was not out and the national anthem was not playing. Then they stood, walked back to the sideline, the flag came out, the national anthem played, and they all stood for it. So they knelt in their show of unity. They stood for the national anthem. Is that the recipe here? Do you think that appeases both sides?
I don't think so, because I think what we're seeing in our country now, especially when it comes to our politics, everyone has such a hard line, especially on this issue. I saw so many people just blowing up when you saw the Dallas Cowboys take a knee before the national anthem, and it's just like, well, wait a minute. If they're taking a knee before the national anthem, then what is your anger really about then? And then on the other side, people are like, well, if you're taking a knee before the national anthem, then you're really not.
What are you protesting?
What are you protesting?
It's not the spirit of the original
protest. It's not the spirit of the protest.
What it struck me as was that is a statement of response to the president,
right? Yes.
Or the comments he made,
right,
and the way he got very personal with players and their actions and the choice of words that he used. It isn't in any way in keeping with the spirit of the original protest started by Colin Kaepernick and followed by other players through the course of last season and the beginning of this season. So I don't have a real sense of where it goes from here. Now, D Wood, you played in the league pretty recently. I assume you're talking to some guys who are still playing. Do you have a sense of whether this slows down to, I don't know what the right word is here, of where it proceeds to from here? I don't think it slows down, but I think the one overwhelming theme is the original message is getting watered down.
Yep.
It's getting watered down by these acts of, what we call acts of unity. Are you just holding hands for the optics of it, or are you linking arms and taking a kneel because you truly and honestly want to move the conversation forward? That's what's really been lacking in this whole ordeal, is we've been stuck in neutral when it comes to this flag and not progressing forward. Remember, the whole point of protest is to shock the status quo. The status quo is just not good enough. And what's frustrating a lot of people is, okay, let's move to the real conversation so we can have real change.
And what is that move? That's it, because I see people on Twitter on both sides, some saying, what are these players doing outside of kneeling? Well, there are some that are doing a lot.
Yeah,
I
think that to me, and again, being a former player and speaking to a lot of guys around the league, is when you see people talk about, well, these, spoiled millionaire athletes and, just trying to down the guys. And it's like, listen, You guys have no idea the time, energy, money that these guys invest in their particular communities where they're playing for their respective team. It's just not fair for you to try to attack these guys because of how they're making a living and how much money they're making. It's just not fair in my opinion.
And one last thing I'll say, because I know we want to talk some football, is we have our views here. And while I had said I wouldn't kneel, I would be one of those that would understand my teammate who wanted to kneel and listen to the discussion about it, whether it's the Chris Long way of putting your hand on the shoulder of the guy kneeling. That's however it was. There would be a discussion because of a peaceful protest. And I hear a lot of news talk shows where they're just irate and so stuck on, I won't even listen to what you have to say because you're disrespecting our veterans, right? So they won't even get to the point of saying, wait, this is a peaceful protest. Just listen to what they're saying. They won't get past that. And because they hear others like us on the radio say, well, I understand their protest. I wouldn't do that, but I'll listen to them. And then, so my point is, okay, don't care what I say because, yes, I didn't serve while I have a father that was in the Marines and a father-in-law. I didn't serve. But I would have loved, as I'm listening to this one show, for the phone to ring and then pick up and take this caller and say, hey, hello, I'm the 97-year-old war veteran who you saw on Instagram taking a knee in response to what the players are doing, saying they have every right to do that and I support them. Now, what are these loudmouths that are telling the players just to get the hell out of the country if they don't want to be here? What do you say to that guy? Because while the majority, I still think, of veterans do look at it as some disrespect, there are plenty of veterans who have spoken up and have said, I understand what they're doing. And I would love those people to call into these radio shows where these people are so dead set on, get the hell out of our country, you spoiled millionaires. If one of those veterans called and said, hey, I think what they're doing is just fine. Let's actually listen to what they are saying. I just wonder what the response would be.
And I just got to make this one point. Protest isn't meant to be comfortable.
Right.
We as a nation haven't gotten to where we are today by being comfortable. We were put in very uncomfortable situations throughout the history of our country. That's what makes our country great. We're not North Korea. We are the United States of America, and because we have the freedoms to be able to do the things that you're seeing guys do on Sunday, that's what really makes our country great.
All right, Damian Woody is in our studio here talking football. Will Kane on the way. We'll go on the field now with a bunch of comparatively normal things, as I say, like Odell Beckham peeing in the end zone in what I think can fairly be described as a really distasteful way of celebrating a touchdown. In a fourth quarter in which a Giant team that had scored 13 points through its first 15 quarters this year almost came all the way back and beat the Eagles on Sunday, and Odell was really the only reason why. I mean, he's so brilliantly talented, and yet you have this stuff. D. Wood and the owner came out and said, he's unhappy about it, and he'll talk to him. What are we doing with Odell? If you're the Giants, if you're a teammate, what are we doing here?
Well, Mike, you know this. It's like a sliding scale of justice when it comes to like talent, because the guy is so talented. You have to tolerate him, because if you take Odell out of that lineup, what are the New York Football Giants? They're a drastically different football team. Now, I'm not sitting here and saying that I agree with the gesture they did, because for me, I look at it as this whole celebration repeal that Roger Goodell set forth this offseason or whenever it was. You've had all this time to really conjure up or think about different celebrations that you will be able to do once you score a touchdown. And the best thing you can think of is the old, lifting a leg, peeing on the hydrant type of action. I mean, bro, you got to be smarter than that. I thought you were more creative than that. Come on, man. Like, I need better. I want to see better. I'm kind of disappointed in some of these celebrations anyway.
And it's a 15-yard penalty.
But the bottom line is nothing's going to happen to him. I mean, to think that Mara is going to go down there and discipline him and say, I'm going to sit you, I doubt any of that's happening. They're going to maybe ask him in a little more fatherly, sternly voice to please not do that anymore, because the bottom line is you are costing your team 15 yards.
Right.
As my son said earlier, and I've agreed all along, the sideline antics as I said, when he was headbutting the net, if you watched past him, players were just walking to the bench, not even turning their head at him because they're used to those antics. To me, it doesn't affect them. When you take your helmet off in the end zone and it's 15 yards, when you pee like a dog and it's 15 yards, now you're costing your team. Now you got to have a little more of a conversation but if you're the 38th guy on the roster, it's a harsh conversation that may cost you some money or a job.
Right.
But with Odell Beckham, it's like, can we mute that a little bit, before we hand you all this money and you continue to be one of the best receivers in the league?
Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guest on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line was a star born in Foxborough on Sunday. Yeah, Tom Brady stole the show and was spectacular and winds up throwing the game-winning touchdown. But how about the rookie quarterback he was facing on that day in that setting against that coach?
It was a tremendous performance because I don't know if people really understand how hard it is to go up to Foxborough and win up there. I mean, there's a lot of veteran quarterbacks that can't go up there, let alone a rookie.
Never happened.
It's never happened. But I was just the performance he put up. He showed you everything in the toolbox. His legs, being able the escapability, because there were a couple of times where I thought he was going to get flattened out there, but it just shows you the tremendous talent that Deshaun Watson has to be able to escape and keep his eyes downfield. A lot of these rookies, they'll just, they'll move around and look to run, but the fact that he was running around but also had his eyes downfield, that's what you want to see out of any quarterback. But the fact that he's a rookie lets you know, wow, I don't know if the Patriots want to see this team later on down the year because he's only going to get better.
We have the teams we all thought would be near the top. Is there a team or two that surprised you a little bit that it's putting themselves maybe into a little more of a conversation than we'd probably thought at the beginning of the year? Ooh. You buying into Jacksonville at all?
I think Jacksonville has a lot of talent. I jumped on Jacksonville's bandwagon last year.
Yeah, totally agree.
So I'm hesitant. But they have a lot of really good pieces on both sides of the football. I mean, I think the way they're trying to play the game, I think can take them a long way. That defense is able to get after people, and they have a sledgehammer at the running back position, Leonard Fournette, who's just going to just hammer away. Now, I don't know if Blake Bortles is going to be able to perform the way he performed this last game against the Baltimore Ravens where he had 4 touchdowns. He looked like Joe Montana out there. But I think the formula and how they're building that team is conducive to winning a lot of football games.
Is there any part of you buying into the Bears who the first week had 3 opportunities to beat the Atlanta Falcons, laid an egg the second week, and then beat Pittsburgh in overtime the third week?
I like the two-headed monster at the running back position. Yeah. I think those guys, Cohen and Howard, I think they're really, really good. I think the offensive line is coming together, and they got guys that can get after the passer. They got secondary that really held Big Ben down. It's early, Mike. I'm not jumping all in on the Bears. It's early because a lot of these teams are like Jekyll and Hyde.
You're at least peeking in there.
I'm looking. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, from a distance, I'm like, I can fall for this girl right here, and from a distance.
I'll tell you, the team that I'm starting to buy into, but I want to see if they can do it in weather, is Detroit. I think the Lions, who are literally 6 inches from being 3-0 right now, they're better defensively than you realize. I like the Lions.
Well, the reason the Lions are better is because the Lions used to be built as an indoor team.
Right.
Now they're built as an all-weather team. They've, Bob Quinn, the general manager, has really come in and really focused on the line of scrimmage. That's how you win in this league.
I think they're going to win that division. I'll tell you right now, I think the Lions are going to win that division.
Hot take?
We will see. There's a hot take for you. D. Wood, thanks as always. Great to see you. Will Kane in the GNC Lounge. Live next. Don't miss it. Mike and Mike.